What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 449. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from the Bay Area, California, it's Woodrow Engle. Woody, our resident grinder, is back on the show. Welcome back, buddy.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, man. I decided that we were going to bring you on again this week for our first impression show because, again, I view you very much as one of the pillars of the type of people that we like to talk to here on Limited Resources. And, you know, as a tournament grinder and Pro Tour aspirational player, you are getting ready for GP Sacramento coming up this weekend. And so once M19 actually came out, you've been grinding hard ever since.
Yeah, totally. I'm actually going to GP Minnesota right after that. So I was pretty highly incentivized to at least get the sealed nailed. And I've been drafting quite a bit too. So
right. That's what I meant. The Minnesota is the limited one, right?
They're both limited. Yeah.
Oh, they're both limited. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I'm not going to either of them, but yeah, so this is going to be a show, and I've been drafting and playing some sealed with Adam and stuff. So I've got, 20 drafts under my belt now and a bunch of sealed. So I've been diving deep into the format as well. And we've got a whole bunch of information to bring you here on our M19 first impression show. Before we do, I want to say thank you to our patrons. That's right. The people who help keep this show going, keep me going. People on the Patreon, thank you so much for your support. It is deeply, deeply appreciated. And you get some cool stuff too. We've got giveaways, and I'm going to do a giveaway. In fact, right now, this is the cards that we have from the last, however long of Crack-A-Packs. There's some decent stuff in here. There's a Mox Amber. I don't know if that's actually worth much at this point, but still there's some cool stuff. And then you even get Limduel's Vault. That's right. An Alliance's Limduel's Vault, a Courser of Crewfix, and some other cool stuff. I'll be putting that into a Limited Resources box with some sleeves and some stickers in there as well. And the winner of this particular giveaway is Kevin Miller. Kevin comes from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Even though you stole my basketball team, I will still happily send you your winnings. Thank you, Kevin, for your continued support, and everybody else who does so over on patreon.com/limited resources. We're going to do a couple of Crack-A-Packs for this show. In fact, we're going to put these in the new giveaway sleeve here. So these ones are going to go to the next winner of that. And let's get into these Woodman and see what we've got. So first one out is Loxodon Linebreaker, 2 and a white for a 3/2. We are not playing that guy. At least we're not first picking him. Frilled Sea Serpent, 4 blue for a 4/6 with an activated ability of 5 blue. It gets unblockable until end of turn. No. Trumpet Blast, plus attacking creatures get +2/+0 for 2 and a red. No.
Not a first pick, but
no.
Yeah.
Not a great start so far. Here's our current front runner, Giant Spider. Same as it ever was, 3 and a green for a 2/4 reach.
Yeah, I was like that guy.
Yeah, but first pick? Ugh.
No.
Right? Yeah. Doom Dissenter, 1 and a black for a 1/1 human. When it dies, it becomes 2/2 zombie. Great flavor. I'm not taking it over the spider, I don't think.
No, I don't think so.
Strictly worse? Not really, but kind of worse. Walking Corpse, 1 and a black for a 2/2 zombo. All right, here we go. We got one that, at least for me, and I'm assuming for you too, Woody, will take over number 1 spot here. Angel of the Dawn, 4 and a white for 3/3 flying. When it ETBs, all your creatures get +1/+1 in vigilance until end of turn. That guy's great.
Yeah, that card's been great. Like a lot of times you'll get into a parity situation and the opponent looks like they've stabilized and you slam that and it's kind of everything goes wrong. All their blocks look a little worse, and it's. I
feel like for a common, she's very powerful, right? Just on the higher end of the spectrum, just on raw board impact. When Angel of the Dawn comes down, like she's already a reasonable card at a 3/3 flyer for 5. Now you're not excited about that, but boy, that turn is nasty. Like you said, it's just all their blocks get bad. You don't lose any tempo because they get vigilance anyway, so it's not like. Right. One of those situations where you're like, well, I better hold off. It's like, no, get in there. Yeah, Angel of the Dawn definitely taking that number 1 slot right now. Viashino Pyromancer, 1 and a red for a 2/1. And when it ETBs, it does 2 damage to an opponent. No. All right, this one's pretty good. Salvager of Secrets. It's a card I like quite a bit. 3 blue for a 2/2. When it ETBs, you return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Yeah, I think I'm still on Angel of the Dawn, though, huh?
Yeah, I think so. It's just not it takes so much less to set up than the Salvager.
Yeah, I agree. Next is Root Snare. That's the fog for the format. No. In fact, it is just fog, but for 2 mana.
Yeah.
I saw some people joking that, because fog was just too good. In fact,
just too good.
Yeah, but the truth is, I think that fog can actually be too good in constructed at just green mana. I think that's actually why we see that change, and I don't think it has to do with
right. That makes sense.
Yeah, because realistically, the difference between 2 mana and 1 on a fog in limited is effectively nothing, because you never ever play fog on turn 1 or whatever.
No.
Or and for that matter, you just never play fog. Uncommons: Ether Shield Artificer. 3 and a white for a 3/3, but at the beginning of combat on your turn, target artifact creature you control gets +2/+2 and indestructible until end turn. I like this actually quite a bit in the blue-white artifacts deck, but it's hard to make it work because you have to run some junkers like Field Creeper.
Right. The really cool, the nice combo is going Sky Scanner into this, and then you can really start beating down. But
definitely,
yeah, it's hard. It's hard to set up. I think Angel is a better first pick for white.
I think so too. This is a more narrow card where Angel's just good. Next is an interesting one. This one also goes in that same deck we just mentioned. It's called Skilled Animator, 2 and a blue for a 1/3. And when it enters a battlefield, target artifact you control becomes a 5/5 for as long as you control Skilled Animator.
I haven't really been running this one, even in I guess maybe the couple of times I've been in the artifacts deck, I didn't see this one because it's an uncommon, but I haven't had it played against me very often either. And the couple of times that I have, it really felt like it was not super hard to deal with.
Yeah, I did too. Even though it should be good. Like you should go like Fountain of Renewal and then turn 3, play this, hit you for 5. Like that's very powerful, right?
Yeah.
But it's hard to make it come together. And I had the same experience you did when I had the blue-white deck. I didn't have Skilled Animator. So I think I'd rather just take the Angel at this point.
Yeah.
Ooh, I think Okay. For me, our last uncommon does jump over the top of Angel of the Dawn as number 1. It's Plaguemare.
Plaguemare is really sweet. Yeah.
1 black 2/2 Nightmare Horse, and it can't be blocked by white creatures. And when it enters the battlefield, creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 until end of turn. We give it quite a high grade on the set review, and I have to say it's really lived up to it. In the red-white matchup, this card is devastating. Like it can just completely destroy their whole board state. And even against like a green or a green-black deck where you wouldn't expect it to be great, it still holds its own, and you can usually get some decent value out of it.
You get away with a lot of like attacking into a creature that would bounce. if you have a couple of swamps in play, like people respect it. Like people will not block your 2/2 with their the
Omen Speaker, Druid the Cowl, or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Like none of those 1/3s are ever blocking because of the existence of this card.
Yeah. I mean, except for if I'm playing, because then I just call it anyway and go, oh, they did have the Plaguemare. Anyway, but I would take that over Angel of the Dawn. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I would take it.
All right, so that leaves 1 rare left to see if it can steal the seat here from the Plaguemare, and that rare is Detection Tower.
That ain't going to do it.
Nope. So land adds colorless. You can pay a generic mana and tap it, and it says, until end of turn, your opponents and creatures your opponents control with hexproof can be the targets of spells or abilities you control as if they didn't have hexproof. Anti-hexproof hate. You'd think I'd be behind that the whole way, but as it turns out, not a very exciting card, and I'm taking Plaguemare out of this pack.
Same, yeah.
Okay, let's do it again. Got another pack here, just in case you thought, Woody, for a second that we might be done. All right. First card up, Revitalize. 1 and a white instant, you gain 3 life, draw a card. I have seen people running this in the black-white life gain deck, and it seems fine to me. Otherwise, I wouldn't run it.
Yeah, I've run it a couple of times in that deck. I've sided it in like my higher curve decks against the really aggressive decks because it was just a better play than having a 5-drop in my deck. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's not amazing.
No, it's pretty bad. Uncomfortable Chill. Man, we've got some cantrips, don't we? 2 and a blue instant. Creatures your opponents control get -2/-0 until end of turn. Draw a card. We mentioned in the set review about it being a potentially good sideboard card against the red-white deck, which I think it is But otherwise, I don't main deck it. It's just a classic type of card that it's hard to find room for. It's not that it's a bad card. It actually does something pretty reasonable. If your opponent's attacking into you and you have blockers, Uncomfortable Chill can really make their life difficult, where you can get a card worth of value out of it just on the surface, and then you're still getting a cantrip anyway. But overall, I've been relatively unimpressed by it, just in the sense that it's really hard to make room for it in your deck.
Yeah, I haven't cast it much, and I haven't had it cast against me very often. So.
Speaking of, Catalyst Elemental, 2 and a red for a 2/2, and you can sack it to make 2 red mana. Been bad. I have not been impressed by it. I haven't played it. Oakenform, 2 and a green for an aura that gives a creature +3/+3. Sure. I don't think this is a bad Magic card, but it's another one that I haven't really been focusing on. I'm sure that if you have that Satyr that lets you draw cards, the green-white one, then you probably want it, but otherwise, not really that great.
Yeah, I've run it a couple of times in the green decks that have a lot of Sky Scanners, because sometimes that'll just win you the game. But and it
make a little dragon.
Yeah, like since you got a card back off of Sky Scanner anyways, like when you do get blown out, it doesn't feel quite as bad. But yeah,
true. And if they have to bounce your Sky Scanner,
oh yeah, that's the best.
That's fun. Doom Dissenter again. No. All right, here's a card, Pegasus Courser.
Yeah, I've first picked that before.
Yeah, I think that's a card that's probably the best one out of the ones that we've opened so far. Smelt, that's the destroy target artifact for red. No. Ooh, here we go. I like this one better than Pegasus Courser. Druid of the Cowl, 1 and a green for a 1/3 that taps to add green.
Yeah, that card's sweet. Some of my best start with the turn 2 Druid,
Yeah, I think and we'll talk about this in just a little bit. I'm kind of revamping the way that we do our initial impression show. We've got some data, some facts, and some lists and stuff for you. So one of them is the top 4 commons for each color. And I actually have Druid of the Cowl at number 1 in green, even though Rabid Bite's in there and is an excellent card as well. It's our boy, Sky Scanner.
Ooh, I do like Sky Scanner. I would say it's a disappointing first pick though, I
agree. I would take the Druid over it, in fact.
Yeah.
Next is Fine, Snapping Drake, 3 and a blue for a 3/2 with flying.
Yeah.
I'm still taking the Druid over that. Novice Knight. I'm curious if you've played this one much. This is the white for a 2/3 with Defender, but if it's equipped or enchanted, it can attack.
Yeah, this one's in kind of a weird spot. Usually I want to play it if I can attack with it eventually, because you don't really want it in the aggressive decks, because you usually don't want to be spending a lot of time equipping up creatures. You just want to spew your hand out and then Trumpet Blast. So yeah, it's kind of a weirdly placed card. I haven't been running a ton of it.
Yeah, I think that the best home for it is in a blue-white Flyers deck, where it's a cheap way to stall out the ground, and then you can build out your Flyers on turns 3 and 4 and have something that can trade off for even a 3-drop sometimes.
Sure.
And then if you happen to get it equipped up later, great. Gear per Guide, as boring as he ever was. I don't really like the tour he takes us on. 2 and a green for a 3/2 Elf Scout, and you can pay 2 and a green to make target creature you control unblockable by creatures with power 2 or less. Card is just not impactful. It's just a card you rarely see, and I just don't care about when I do.
Yeah, ability's too expensive, and it's just, yeah.
It's not a bad Magic card. Like, I read it, and I'm like, it's fine, but it's just, like you said, too expensive. Like, I'd rather have Druid of the Cowl.
Right.
Ooh. Oh, love this one. Psychic Symbiont.
Yeah, that's a sweet card.
4 blue-black for a 3/3 flying Nightmare Horror, and when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card, they discard a card.
You want to hear a sad story? I had a Psychic Symbiont in the graveyard that I targeted with Isareth, the one that can rise from the grave when it attacks.
Okay.
And I tapped my mana like before the ability resolved, and it just all drained out of my mana pool because I hit okay, and so X was 0.
Oh no!
It was really so. I time walked myself.
You stranded a Psychic Symbiont.
Yeah, it was really bad.
You time walked yourself instead of getting a free 3/3 flying. They just.
I lost that game.
So the question is, are we Druid of the Cowling or Sky Scanner? Now, we still have the rare, I'll remind you, but right now, where are you at?
I take Druid of the Cowl first. It's just a really, it just enables you to play, like, a higher curve of cards, and you just kind of go green stompy, and, if you turn to it, you're ahead of your opponent pretty significantly, and, I don't know. I like it.
I take Symbiont.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm stupid. Also, the blue-black deck's been very good for me. All right, here's our rare. Open the Graves. This is one I wanted to talk about. We'll just talk about it now. 3 black for an enchantment. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you get a 2/2 black zombie. I give this a pretty low grade on the set review, but I've come up on it a bit. I think it's actually pretty decent. Like, I found myself in numerous scenarios where we were going to be exchanging resources on that level, right? Where I wasn't like, I think that my take on Open the Graves now is that I main deck it. I take it pretty highly. Like, I'm not taking it over Psychic Symbiont, and I'm actually not taking it over Druid of the Cowl either. I also wouldn't take it over Sky Scanner. So I don't think of super highly of it, but I do put it in the deck, and I main decked it, and it did a good job. Like, in everything except for like a blue-white flying matchup, my creatures were crashing into each other and trading, and I just was left over with some leftover stuff. And they used a removal spell, and I got a zombie. And oftentimes the zombies couldn't get in, but they acted as a great way to sort of just hang in the game and keep me ahead on board so that I could, last longer and draw my good stuff.
That's how I felt. It didn't feel like the zombies were ever going to let you like alpha for the win, but you got to make double blocks that you wouldn't normally make, and then you'd get a zombie off of one of them, and then you could double block again, and you'd get a zombie when they killed the other creature. And in this format, especially in the sealed format, it feels like a lot of the games come down to who floods a little bit less, and this card gives you maybe 2-3 extra draw steps to get out of that situation, and that can be pretty good. I think it might be kind of a liability in draft because in my experience, you're running into an aggressive deck like at least once a draft, and it's a pretty bad card in that matchup.
Yeah, I agree. Like the red-white deck, I don't really want this, and then also the blue-white deck, I don't really want it against either. So I'm not in love with it, but it is a little better than I initially gave it credit for, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's it for the Crack-a-Packs. Let's get into the first impression show. First thing I wanted to talk about, Wood, and this was actually sparked by a discussion that you and I had after I had thought of this. So it really sort of solidified it for me that the things I was thinking perhaps weren't just me. The rares.
Yeah.
It feels at least like a lot of the rares and mythics are blanks, are bad, are not what you want when you say open up your sealed pool or that kind of thing. Right. And I actually did some research here to find out if that was just a feeling that I had or if it was actually true. So this is what I did. Actually, this is what you and I did as well, Woody. So what we did is we looked we looked at the M19 rares and mythics, all of them, and we separated them into 2 categories.
3, I think. Yeah.
3 total categories. Yeah. That's right. Mm-hmm. So the first category are full on blanks. I mean, these are total jank, right? Like cards that you open up and you're just like, well, I'm not even touching that card. Like it's just never going to make the cut in any scenario. A lot of the artifacts in the set fall into that. The Desecrated Tomb and the Crucible of Worlds and the Amulet of Safekeeping, these type of cards, right?
Right.
So you've got those ones. And then we've also got cards.
Yeah. I categorize them as cards that I would rather have the best common in that color than these cards, right. Like for example, you have the 2/1 flyer remorseful cleric. Mm-hmm. Like I would rather have a Luminous Bond in my pool than that card, right?
There you go. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So these are cards that are playable. They'll probably make the cut in your deck. So they're not bricks, but at the same time, they're not even as good as some of the better commons, let alone uncommons in their color. Mm-hmm. So what I did was I looked back at Dominaria and I did a comparison. So here's how it broke down. For M19, there are 69 rares and mythics. There are actually only 68 in Dominaria, but it's pretty close to apples here. We found in M19 that 17 of those were full on bricks. You just do not want them style cards. And if you include the type, the mediocre stuff, it ends up being 29 of the 69 are non-rare quality cards. Okay, now this is the first time doing a comparison, so that sounds like a number that I wouldn't be super shocked by, right? They have to put all the fun, goofy stuff, the super expensive cards and all that kind of thing. So who knows? So I wanted to get a litmus test, though, against Dominaria, which is a set that didn't feel that way. I didn't feel like there was a whole bunch of bricks and that it was bad. So what we found was that there was 26 of 68. So there's one fewer rare and mythic card total, but there was 26 of those were non-rare quality cards. So 26 to 29, and then versus 69 to 68. So if we just assume that this is the same number of rares, it's only off by 3. But we dug a little deeper because it still kind of felt that weird, and we did find actually a significant difference, and that was on the full-on bricks. So the Dominaria had 11 cards that we categorized as full-on bricks, where, again, M19 had 17. So that is a significant difference between the two, given that they have roughly the same number. I mean, that's another, half again as much as the others. So that's a lot.
And then the other caveat was Dominaria had a cycle of multicolored uncommons, and 4 out of 5 of them felt like they were rare power level, sort of.
That's true. Yeah.
Slimefoot, Tatiova, these were cards that would just actively pull you into those. Like when you opened a sealed pool and you had a Tatiova, you were really trying to run it, like you'd have to have something kind of drastic going on that would make you not run that. The other caveat was the fixing. There was a colorless artifact, Skittering Surveyor, that would show up in pools pretty often and enable you to run more of your rares. And in this set, we have that in Manolith, but that's not nearly as good of a card, right? It doesn't do anything but tap for mana.
Yeah, almost every deck in Dominaria would play Skittering Surveyor, where that's definitely not true of Dominaria. Or excuse me, of an M19. Yeah. So that is, again, that to me is a major difference, because not only are there significantly fewer or significantly more full-on bricks, but you're also not being backfilled by those bomb level uncommons that Woody just described. So yeah, the truth is there is a big difference in the number of blanks that you see, and that's why you're feeling that way, because there are. Now, that being said, when you talk about the rares from the biggest picture perspective, it's not that different. 26 versus 29 non-rare quality cards, according to us. Now, look, if you want to play along at home, you can go onto Scryfall and just do a search, an advanced search, where you can just bring up the rares and mythics for the set and just keep a tally. Just go ahead and keep a tally of the cards that you think are meh. Okay, sure, it's a 2/1 flyer for 2. I guess I'll probably play it in my deck, but that's not what I was hoping for when I opened my rare. And then the cards that are like, this is terrible. There's not very many decks that would even be able to cast this, like a Gigantosaurus falls into that category, for example. Right? So you've got those, and then of course anything left over are the cards that you actively want and the good ones. And see what you came up with, but for LR style, this is what we came up with. And yeah, I think it's important to know that there just simply are more blanks in M19 than there are in Dominaria. So let's take a look at the go ahead.
So I was going to say one other caveat was that, 4 of the bombiest cards in M19 they're all triple colored cards, which that makes it pretty tough too. You open one of those in your pool, you have to get pretty lucky to run them. If you draft a white black deck and you open up what's it called? Palladium Moors, in your second pack, I mean, you just can't run it, you're completely hamstrung. So yeah, I've just found, specifically in sealed, you're going to be experiencing some pretty wild swings,
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. Yep. No, totally. So keep that in mind. I think it also puts a lot more pressure on the gold uncommons, because while there are some very, very good ones in M19, they're still not on the level of the ones that they were in Dominaria. But there are, Poison Tip Archer is very good. Regal Bloodlord's been great. Skyrider Patrol's been excellent for me. Yeah. Heroic Reinforcements in the right deck is good. Brawlbash Ogre is fine, but not great. Same thing with Aerial Engineer. It's good. Draconic Disciple's been good. Drake's been fine. At any rate, these are good uncommons that help backfill, but not to the level of full on rare quality cards like we saw in Dominaria.
Right.
So keep that in mind. You're not, if you feel like you're getting a sealed pools with a bunch of bricks in them, you're not alone. Let's take a look at the common rankings and see what we came with. I came up with these kind of off the top of my head, but stand by them to a point. And maybe Woody, if you present a strong argument, you can make me change them around. So White, fresh off the presses with a hot take. I have Sun Crowned Stag at number 1. Every time somebody plays this card, I'm like, uh-oh. Like, that's a problem.
Yeah, it is really good. I've been not like, I wouldn't say that I'd be stoked to first pick it, but I have first picked it a couple of times. And usually when I'm solidly in white, there has to be something pretty amazing in the pack for me to take it over a stag. Yeah, it's just white's kind of an aggressive color. It fits really well into the white-red deck. It kind of fits fine in the white-green deck too, you know, like tapping down their biggest creature and attacking with that and the Colossal Dreadmaw is a pretty good way to win, you know.
Oh, yeah. It's just good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Next one is probably Luminous Bonds. It might be Angel of the Dawn. I have these basically interchangeably close. I guess I would probably take my first Luminous Bonds over it. So I'll give that to number 2. Yeah, and then number 3, I have Angel of the Dawn, which we talked about earlier. And then I actually really like Gallant Cavalry quite a bit in the format. It has impressed me because in the red-white deck, it does exactly what you want. It makes 2 bodies, and they're both reasonable. It gums up the ground, and I've just been overall impressed by it. I'm a big fan of Gallant Cavalry. I think it slots into the format very well. Yeah,
I've liked it a lot too. It works really well with the graveyard recursion cards. Like if you end up in black-white, Grave Diggering one feels really good. Macabre Waltzing one feels pretty good. And the vigilance, it tends to matter, you know, like.
Yep, it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I mean, I knew like whatever it was called, Call the Cavalry or whatever in Dominaria, it was always pretty decent, but that was in a much more powerful set overall. When you lower the rest of the cards around it, because Gallant Cavalry is effectively the same card, it's better relative to its components. And then also the fact that we have those 3 big payoffs for the red-white deck.
Right.
With Trumpet Blast, Inspired Charge, and the Heroic Reinforcements, or is that what it's called?
Heroic Reinforcements, yeah.
Heroic Reinforcements. I mean, those all work really well with a card like that as well. So, and then, you can also just keep it real simple, and, it picks up equipment pretty well. And Marauder's Axe is a fine Magic card as well. So that's it for white. Blue, I actually have Essence Scatter number 1.
Yeah. Essence Scatter has been great. You know, that was a card, like I would say, back in the Doomblade days, it was kind of a card that I would scoff at, like, oh, these people are running way too many Essence Scatters. But no, it's been performing really well in this format, I think.
Yeah, this format has some aggressive-ish decks, but I wouldn't call them particularly fast. Like, it's not a lot of 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop. It's more like setting up for one of those big finishers, like I mentioned before, getting some tempo damage and tempo plays in, and Essence Scatter can disrupt it. I have Divination next. I've just been casting a lot of it. I mean, one of the ways to get over the hump when a format's a little bit flat on power level is to just have more stuff. So I have Divination there. Dwindle, I've been playing it. I mean, I think it's a little closer to the Necessary Evil level of removal than I'd like, but it's been getting the job done. I mean, it's still a reasonable removal spell, I think.
I've actually got them switched. I've got Dwindle second and Divination third. I've been pretty happy with Dwindle, especially like normally those kind of effects, like the fact that they leave the blocker behind if you're not in the flyer deck is really annoying, and this one gets around it. Like, they get the one chump block, but yeah, it makes the creature much more useless than this effect normally leaves a creature, right? It's not like Aether Meltdown or whatever. So, yeah.
And then the last one I have is Salvager of Secrets, which is a card I've been playing a lot of. I think that there's kind of a cap to how many of these you want just because it does cost 5 mana, but the first 2 I'm usually quite happy to get.
Definitely, yeah. And obviously it goes up the more good things you have to get back, right? Like if you have 2 Lich's Caress, it's a great card.
Definitely.
Yeah.
One of the cards that I feel like I had a chat with Adam about this, that's been a little overrated in my mind, though still quite playable, is Omen Speaker.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing about Omen Speaker to me is that I think people are overvaluing it a little bit right now. I still play it. Like I'm not trying to get on a soapbox about Omen Speaker, but its impact, I think, oftentimes isn't quite as stark as people will give it credit for. Ultimately, it can help you find the things that you want to find sooner. And if speed matters, then sure, then that's good. Like, for example, in a blue-white Flyers deck or a blue-white deck like that,
right,
that can really help you get ahead, or find the things that you need to stay ahead while your Omen Speaker can block on the ground. But in like a control deck, it's still just a 1/3. And even if it does scry you and help you find the things that you need some percentage of the time, the impact it has on the game is actually not that heavy, right? A lot of times it's not about when you find the thing, it's that you have the thing available and inevitability comes into play. And if that's what the crux of the game is, then Omen Speaker is actually not that good because it's just not that impactful of a card on the board. It just doesn't do that much, right? So you're leaning on that scry 2 really heavily, but imagine if you have a patient rebuilding in your deck and you're playing in a control, like a grindy matchup, shall we say, right? Where it's all about card advantage and that kind of thing. You play an Omen Speaker and you're trying to find your patient rebuilding. You might bottom 2 cards and find it a little bit sooner, but you've also used an entire card to do that. And beyond doing that, Omen Speaker has done almost nothing, right? It doesn't attack well. And in a stalled out board, it's not even a particularly good blocker. So, you would have found your patient rebuilding at some point anyway, because again, if it's more about inevitability, then the Omen Speaker goes down. Now, when you are facing down an aggressive deck, though, an Omen Speaker can be really, really good because it's a good early blocker and it can make sure you hit your land drops and get you to the stuff that you actually need when timing is of the essence. So I wouldn't cut it from my deck, but I would be cognizant. Like, I don't think I'd run like the third Omen Speaker. I think the second one, I'm already starting to be like, do I really want this? And then, certain matchups you certainly will, but certain matchups you won't.
Yeah, I'm happy if I don't have to play. Like, my best blue decks don't have to run an Omen Speaker, but it makes some matchups just look silly. Like, I mean, if they're trying to, hit you with Child Knights and stuff like, it really just sits there and yeah.
In fact, that's a good, that's a good way to look at it. If the 1/3 blocker is important, then Omen Speaker is very good.
Right.
But if the 1/3 blocker is not, I would be much less excited about running it just for Scry 2.
Yeah, it's a much better sideboard card than a main deck card, I would say.
True,
like,
yeah.
you side it in and it feels like a B, when you turn to it.
Yeah.
But
all right, let's move on to red. Number 1, I have Electrify.
Okay.
This kills almost anything. I have Shock number 2. And to be honest, Shock has disappointed me a little bit. There are a lot of these 1/3s floating around. It misses some of the things, but God, it's just so hard to take it off of this list because it does kill just enough things. It kills Departed Deckhand, even Wind Mage. It kills Snapping Drake. God forbid they play one of those against your Shock deck. It kills a lot of the small black creatures like Child of Night. It even kills like Death Baron, right? Like you're killing a rare with it sometimes. It's just enough. The Skymarch Bloodletter is another one. Boggart Brute, it kills. Like, these are all cards that you see draft in and draft out, and it's pretty nice to have an answer for. So I still have Shock at number 2.
Shuts down a couple of really annoying rare creatures and Dismissive Pyromancer and the Archaeologist,
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yep. So I still have it pretty high, but it does miss some stuff too. I have Boggart Brute at number 3.
Yeah.
3/2 with Menace. I like that card a lot. And then Goblin Instigator is my number 4. That's the one that makes a 1/1 with a 1/1 with it.
Yeah, which is a card normally it looks pretty anemic, but I mean, I think it kind of speaks to what red is trying to do in this format, which is to go wide and, Trumpet Blast or play some other mass pump spell for the win.
Totally. That's exactly what it does. Black, I have Lich's Caress at number 1.
Yes.
Do you agree with that? Do you 100%. Think that's the best black common? Okay.
Yeah.
And then I have Strangling Spores next.
Strangling Spores. It's been good. It takes down things bigger than 3/3 pretty consistently, in my experience. You just get them to block and
me too. There's a lot of blocking.
Something. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I have Skeleton Archer I have at number 3. The 3 and a black 3/3, when it ETBs, it does 1 damage to anything. I actually like that card a lot.
Yeah. It that card, the existence of that card just like Plague Mirror, it really changes the way that you block, like they'll make an attack that just, like, why are they attacking their 3/3 into my giant spider? And then you're like, oh, so.
Yep. Yep. And there's some neat combos we'll talk about in a little bit. And then fourth, I have Skymarch Bloodletter, 2 and a black, 2/2 flying, and it drains your opponent for 1 when it enters the battlefield. That guy's just rock solid and fits in the deck. I have honorable mention for Vampire Neonate, but I actually had it a little below the Bloodletter.
Yeah, it's good in a specific deck, I think. So.
Yeah. Green, I have Druid of the Cowl #1, like I mentioned. Mm-hmm. And then I have Rabid Bite. I think you could switch those. Like, I think Rabid Bite is a viable removal spell, but I just value the Druid of the Cowl very, very highly.
Yeah. Rabid Bite goes up depending on what your second color is. Like, if you're green-blue, then the Rabid Bites get pretty important because you're just not going to have any removal, But, but if you're red-green, you prioritize the Druid of the Cowls because you're going to get good red removal anyways, and it's much more important to be able to cast your Volcanic Dragons and stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah. And then I've got Bristling Boar next. That's the 3 and a green for a 4/3 that can only be blocked by 1 creature. Yeah,
that card's I like the reverse menace mechanic. It makes it so that you aren't trading off for like a 2/2 and the 1/1 that ramped them into a land, just doesn't feel great, and making them trade a legit creature is pretty good.
What do you think about that card, by the way? What is that card called? Boy, the names haven't really.
Elvish Rejuvenator.
Yeah, that one. What do you think about that? Like, would that be on your top 4? I'll tell you that #4, I have Colossal Dreadmaw.
Yeah, no, I don't think Rejuvenator is in my top 4, but there are some decks that like really, really need it. Especially ones that are like splashing a 3rd color, and so they're playing a lot of the tap lands. Like when you play a Rejuvenator into a tap land, it really feels like you got away with something.
Have you bricked yet?
I have bricked, yeah. I've bricked, and the worst part about bricking with Elvish Rejuvenator is you just put 5 non-land cards to the bottom, so you're about to flood really bad.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I have also had the distinct. I had my opponent brick, and they just put in the chat quote. They just said something like put the top 5 cards of your library on the bottom of your library or something. Like, oh no. Yeah, that's pretty bad. All right. So there's the colors broken down at least roughly by top 4s. One of the other topics that got brought up, I think on Twitter, that I wanted to talk about were mana sinks. This is something that, when we start to look at the big picture on a limited set, we start off by going at the individual card level for the set review here. And then when we get to this show, to the first impressions and the first few weeks of the show, of the new set, I should say, we try to start looking at the big picture stuff, because there's all these questions that you have about a limited set, and they come in the form of many different things. Is there a sweeper? What are the ramp and or fixing? Is there colorless fixing? Right? What are the reach creatures? What are the sideboard cards that we see in and out? Is there a naturalize? Is there a plummet? Right? These type of sort of traditional cards. What type of ramp / fixing does green get that other colors don't? Like Gift of Paradise, for example, Druid of the Cowl, that kind of thing. Right? We start breaking down the archetypes, of course, and doing all those things. But one of the things that pops up a lot is, what are the mana sinks like? Because one of the things that happens is when you simplify a format like M19 is compared to Dominaria, for example, by taking out things like Kicker or Morph or any of these cards that allow you to do something early and then do it later, or do something early and then do something better later, or do something better later, right? Kicker being the sort of classic on that one. You can do something early, but if you wait, you can spend more mana and get a bigger effect. Other ways that this pops up are like graveyard recursion cards. Again, going back to Dominaria, cards like Gitu Chronicler is a perfect example of a card that you can do early, play it, or you can play it later on and get a card back and use it to get value going. Same thing with the Skin Witch, my best friend from that set. And so these are all cards that help you more efficiently spend your mana for different periods of the game. But one of the things that we look for specifically are mana sinks. And these are places to put your mana repeatedly. And a way to tell if a card's a mana sink, a good litmus test for it is it's late in the game. You've got cards on the battlefield. Your opponent has cards on the battlefield. You're stalled out. You have no cards in your hand. It's your turn. You draw a card. It's a land. Not what you wanted to see. Do you have anything to do? Right? Is there anything you can do with your mana at this point that will allow you to gain advantage? And this is a big deal in limited because flooding almost happens by default. Most people tend to play just north of 40% of their entire deck are lands. That's actually quite a bit. Luis, and he thinks that 16 lands is probably where you'd ideally like to be, but it's better to play it safe and play 17 so that you can guarantee that you get to play Magic every time and give yourself a chance to win. But you're looking for reasons to slim down that number a little bit, when possible. And mana sinks can really help out. So let's look at the mana sinks in M19. I went through the whole set to try to find all the common and uncommon ones because the rare one's great. I mean, that's totally sweet, but I'm talking about the ones that we can actually reliably get. So there's not that many.
No.
The only one that I really like is Arcane Encyclopedia, which is the 3-mana artifact that lets you play 3 mana, tap it, and draw a card. That is an incredible late game mana sink, right? Again, snapshot. I draw my card for the turn. It's a land. I look down. I have Arcane Encyclopedia. I tap 3. I draw another card. Now I'm churning through my library. I'm hitting my land drops and I'm off to the races. That to me is your number one mana sink and one that I value quite highly as a result.
Yeah. That's another one it's better in sealed. Like sometimes you have to bring it out, against specific decks in draft. But it's been awesome. Like it's one of the first things that I look for. Like if I open up a sealed pool, I sort my rares, look at my rares, and then I immediately look over to my artifacts to see if I have an Arcane Encyclopedia. It's just one of the cards I really want to open.
Same. It just gives you so much late game oomph. Now it is slow. As you mentioned, it can be actually prohibitively slow, but that is a card that I want to see. Now things actually start to trail off pretty quickly.
Right.
Frilled Sea Serpent, it is a mana sink, right? This is the 4/6 that you can pay 7 mana to make it unblockable until end of turn. Look, hey, in that situation I described, that counts. That's a place to dump your mana and get an advantage. This one's more of a one-shot, but I do kind of count it this way, which is a Draconic Disciple.
Right.
So this is the 1 green-red 2/2 that taps for any color, but you can pay 7 mana, tap it, and sack it to make a 5/5 dragon. Now, admittedly, this is not fit my definition perfectly because it's not a repeatable mana sink, but boy, is it powerful place to put a bunch of mana late where you can still do something early.
Right. Whereas the Druid of the Cowls, that's a lot like playing an extra land and late in the game after you've spewed your hand out. They can block, but they don't have a huge impact on the game. At least this is a ramp spell that turns into a threat that they're going to have to deal with or die. So
yeah, totally. And this is though closer to the kicker type mechanic rather than what I was mentioning with the repeatable mana sinks. But the reason why I have it in this upper tier is because that's the last card. I'm reaching, just trying to find it. Because I'm going to list you off all the other ones that I found, but none of these are particularly impressive. And some of them don't even really fit the description. So I'm going to go quickly through these. Talons of Wildwood. That's the +1/+1 and trample, but you can pay 3 mana to bring it back. Sometimes this is just on a creature that can't attack, so you can't mana sink it anyway. But at least if that creature dies, you can spend a little bit of mana to get it back and replay it. So it's not nothing. It's just not repeatable. This next one I actually do like quite a bit. It's Departed Deckhand. That's the 1 and a blue 2/2, and you can pay 3 and a blue to give another creature unable to be blocked except by spirits until end of turn. So that one I actually do like. In fact, I'm going to take that one out of this tier and I'm going to put it up in the upper tier. I think that is the type of one that can kind of break a game open.
Yeah, it's a legitimate mana sink at the end of the game.
Next one is Vampire Neonate. That's the 1 mana 03. What is
03.
it? Why did I forget that? 03. Thanks. And then you can pay 2 mana and tap it to drain your opponent for 1. Now that does fit the description. The problem is that it's a minor effect, right? This isn't going to just win you the game or let you run away with it like drawing an extra card per turn does.
Yeah, by itself, there's definitely some synergies that can make it into a potent effect.
Right, but from the mana sink perspective, it doesn't quite fit the bill. Siegebreaker Giant. Now this one's pretty good. This is the 3 red for a 6/3 with trample, and you can pay 3 in a red to have target creature not be able to block this turn. Look, if you have really flooded out, this does fit the bill. It does, and it can make your opponent's life difficult. It's just a little conditional because you have to be either ahead or at parity for it to be a thing. You can't just simply dump mana into it to get value, but still. Right. That counts. That's a mana sink. Do I have to say this one?
Yeah, Gear-Up-Here?
Yeah, Gear-Up-Here Guide. Yeah. So we talked about this guy earlier. This is the 3/2 that, anyway, I'm not going to reread it, but the one that makes it so that small creatures can't block a creature you control. Again, sure, it does something, but this isn't just like a consistent form of advantage. Now, again, I got a little desperate here because I'm just looking for anywhere to put mana that has a reasonable effect on the game. And Marauder's Axe kind of does, right? It's 2 mana, 2 to equip, and the creature gets +2/+0. So at least you can put it on something small, attack with it, hopefully trade off, and then pay some mana to move it over. Yeah. So any of these equipment does give you something. I have Rogue's Gloves on here as well for that reason, even though I'm not a big fan of the card. But still, these aren't really what you want, right?
Yeah, no, and Rogue's Gloves, Marauder's Axe can kind of feel like a mana sink if you're at parity and you get to re-equip and trade up every single turn. It kind of feels like you're doing something. Rogue's Gloves, you're either able to connect or you're not, right? Like it's kind of if you have a flyer or something like that can get in consistently and draw a card, then you're in business. But if you're all on the ground, it isn't really much of a mana sink at all.
Right. Yeah. Another one that I have, again, these are technically mana sinks, but they're just not really what you want. Suspicious Bookcase, the 2 mana 0/4 defender, and you can pay 3 and tap it to have a creature get unblockable until end of turn.
Yeah, it's suspect.
It's something. Yeah. There's spots where it's okay, right? But it's not great. Right. Not, again, looking at Arcane Encyclopedia, that's the kind of thing you want to be.
I'd rather have the book than the bookcase.
Definitely. Yeah. This one I had to put on because it technically met my requirement, but boy, I do not recommend playing it. It's Millstone. Yeah. So 2 mana artifact, 2 tap it to mill your opponent for 2. Sure, it's a place to put mana, but that's not a reliable win condition.
I have heard in Sealed it can be a win condition, but I don't know. I haven't seen it work once. So, but I also haven't seen it played a ton.
I could see it.
Yeah.
I think it's terrible, but
if you can generally bring the board to parity, I mean, that will win you the game eventually, but
yeah. The thing about that argument that I always have a hard time with is that it's really hard to bring the board to parity when one of your cards is a Millstone.
Yeah, for sure.
It just doesn't do anything, I don't know. I guess in good scenarios where you have like a good deck with a lot of card advantage and good cheap removal and blah, 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 then Millstone totally fine as a win con.
Yeah.
One other one that you brought up actually, Wood, that was not quite our definition, but still is one that could pop up and you should keep your eye out for, is combination of Ravenous Harpy and Reassembling Skeleton.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So how does that work?
So Harpy has the ability to pay 1 and sacrifice a creature to put a +1/+1 counter on her. And Reassembling Skeleton says that you can pay a black and a 1 to return it from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So together, that just turns into black and 2 to put a counter on Harpy over and over and over again, basically in multiples of 3. So, if you have 6 mana, you can do it twice. If you have 9 mana, you can do it 3 times. If you're up to 12, you can do it 4 times in a turn. But that'll end the game pretty quickly if you can consistently get that going. And that definitely feels like a mana sink if you can put it together. And it's an uncommon and a common, right? It's not.
No, they're both uncommon.
Oh, are they both uncommon? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. The skeleton's uncommon. I guess I've just been lucky. I've been drafting a lot of them. So.
Yeah.
It's not a super, it is, I guess by definition, it's an uncommon combo, but,
indeed,
when you get it together though, it does really feel like you're doing it.
Yeah, it does. So that's what I just wanted to look out for. And I'm sure there's a few others, but I think that's a problem. I mean, I just do if they're not going to give us efficient ways to use our removal, then we need more mana sinks. And if they don't give us those, then you're going to flood out more. You're just going to flood out more than you did before. So, looking around, what are some of the ways that you can help mitigate flood? Because of course here in LR, we want to give you takeaways. We don't want to just tell you, hey, this is some bad news. We want to tell you, how do you adjust to this? Because the first instinct might be, well, I'll play fewer lands. And while that is possible in some decks, you can look into that. The most you can do in reasonable scenarios is to play 16 instead of 17. So you're not, fundamentally dramatically changing your likelihood of flooding by doing that. You're just hedging it in your direction a little bit. But you can play some cards that you might not normally like. One of them is Tormenting Voice.
Yeah.
Right. And, you can play that card if you have a deck that's prone to flooding out. I wouldn't call it amazing, but it's 1 in a red sorcery. And, as additional costs to cast it, you discard a card and you draw 2 cards. So basically you just hold a land in your hand. And when you draw it, you discard the land and then you draw 2 fresh cards. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I started off thinking that card would basically just never show up in play. And now, specifically in sealed, I think that if you're red and you're not going to be cutting something amazing, like having 1 Tormenting Voice in your deck is a pretty good thing. Like you do end up in a lot of situations where you just have 3 or 4 land in your deck. And if you get to pitch 1 and draw 2, your opponent groans, right? It's like, it turns into a groan test in those situations. Right. So,
it's bad news bears for your opponent. Yeah. And, of course, the big boy version of Tormenting Voice is Sift.
Right.
Which is similar in the sense that you often are incentivized to hold that 1 card in your hand. If you've kind of got enough mana to operate on, and then you play your Sift and guarantee that you're going to be able to discard a land to your Sift.
Right.
But that's a great way to dig through your deck and kind of filter out some of the lands at the same time. Certainly more powerful than Divination, though I also, advocate for that. The downside to playing cards like just straight up Divination is that, they do help you get more cards, which can help mitigate flood just by having raw cards. But what you really want are more spells. And so another card, of course, that comes to mind is Macabre Waltz, right? And this is a card that allows you to exchange an additional unneeded land for 2 spells. Right now you're in business. That's some business right there. So Macabre Waltz is another card that I think has seen a decent amount of play, but I think is even better in this format given the propensity to flood out a little bit.
All right. Another method. People in draft, you see the red-white deck pretty frequently, and in that deck sometimes is playing 16 lands, I'm sure, if the curve is low enough. But even when it's just running 17 lands, like a deck like that kind of, it's ending the game before you have a chance to flood, right? Like, you're kind of just going all in, smashing away, and you sort of you don't really put yourself in that position, right? To kind of trade resources at a normal rate and then all of a sudden run out of gas, it's it's just a way to go under flood, I guess,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So keep your eye open though for any ways that you can find to not flood out. 2-card mana sinks or cards like the ones that we mentioned to help you get around that. Because if the games go long, you are likely to flood, and that's just a real issue.
Oh, there's one card, Dry Greenseeker. Now that's a way to mitigate flood.
Yeah, we should talk about that. Let's just talk about that one right now.
Okay.
Because I love that card. I went out on a limb and gave that card a B in the set review. And I think I was right. The card's been awesome for me every time I've played it. This is the one that's an uncommon for 1 and a green. It's a 1/3 and it's a dryad. You tap it to look at the top card of your library. If it's a land, you put it in your hand.
Yeah, that card has just been it's so good on both ends of the spectrum. Like you're able to keep 2 landers that you wouldn't normally keep because you're so much more likely to draw into the lands that you're going to need to play out your hand. And then once you have enough lands to play all of your spells, you are just like, you're making it so hard to flood from that point, right?
Yeah,
you look
turboing through.
Yeah, you see gas, you tap it after you've drawn your gas to get, you're either drawing more gas and you're happy, or you're getting that land off the top of your deck. It's just, it's been fantastic. And it blocks too.
I was really happy. Yeah, and it blocks too, though I never block with it. It's because it's my precious.
Right.
But I've been really happy with Drag Greenseeker. I've heard some people just call it Courser of Crewfix, which I thought was funny, but it does kind of. Okay, so let's get into a couple of the sort of big picture questions that we had about the format coming in. These are a little specific, but it's just questions I had that I think we have better answers for and I have a better understanding of. So the first one is, tribal synergies, are they even real? If you haven't played the format as much as Woodrow and I have, you might open up I don't know, like a blue rare, the one that's a spirit that pumps other spirits, right?
Yeah.
You might open up that card. What is that card called? Something.
Lingering
Spirit?
Phantom. Is that right?
Supreme Phantom.
Supreme Phantom. Yeah.
1 in a blue 1/3 flyer. Other spirits you control get +1/+1. You might think, hey, this has got to be a thing, right? Why would they put this in the set if I didn't have a whole bunch of spirits, to go off of? The truth is, there aren't that many.
No.
And so we're going to go through the kind of some of the major archetypes that we were looking at here, just to see what exactly are viable as far as these type of things go, and which ones are not. So let me I'm going to actually look up right now how many spirits in this set. Departed Deckhand, that is not a real card. Remorseful Cleric, Supreme Phantom. That's it.
Yeah.
So 2 rares and an uncommon.
That's you're gonna have a tough time.
Yeah, so you're gonna have a pretty tough time making your spirits deck based on that. So no, spirits is not a thing, even though there is a lord for whatever reason. Goblins, actually, yeah, goblins is approaching a thing. Now you do kind of have to make it work a little bit, but it's actually pretty decent. So just in the set, we've got Boggart Brute. For whatever reason, the Dark Dweller Oracle is a goblin. That's the rare. Goblin Instigator, which notably makes 2 goblins. Goblin Motivator, which is the 1/1 for 1 that can give other things haste, which is really bad in my experience.
Right.
Goblin Trashmaster. This is your payoff. This is like your enabler. This is the 2 red 3/3 Goblin Warrior at rare, and it gives other goblins you control +1/+1. And you can also sack a goblin to destroy an artifact, and that counts him too. There's also Gutter Snipe, which if you're in a goblin style archetype, sure, you can run it 2 in a red for a 2/2, and when you cast an instant or sorcery, it does 2 damage to your opponent. And then a really good one with Volley Veteran, which is the 3 in a red 4/2 goblin and uncommon. When it enters a battlefield, it deals damage equal to the number of goblins you control to an opponent's creature. So that's actually quite a few. Even if you take the Dark Dweller Oracle out, because it's a rare, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 common and uncommon, plus the Trashmaster on top of that. So this is actually a thing that you can do. I've had this deck where I opened a Trashmaster in a weak pack. I took it and I just prioritized Goblin Instigators, and I got lucky enough to get a Volley Veteran and a couple of Boggart Brutes as well. And every time I drew my Trashmaster, it was fantastic. It really was. It was great. And I even blew up my opponent's equipment when they targeted removal at the Trashmaster itself. So yeah, I think that of the viable tribal archetypes in here, Goblins, I think, is probably the best one.
Yeah, so the density's there, but to be clear, there's only 2 payoffs. One of them is an uncommon, one of them is a rare. Is that correct? Or
correct? Yeah, that is correct. Yes.
And the Volley Veteran's pretty sweet. Like, I treat that card kind of like a worse stats Skeleton Archer until I start seeing a density where I think it's going to be a shock, pretty consistently, mm-hmm. And then it's pretty good, But yeah, unless you specifically open up Trashmaster pick 1, you're not getting paid off a ton for drafting specifically goblins. Most of those cards just kind of slot into the red aggressive decks anyways, and if you happen to open up a Trashmaster in pack 3 and you're already drafting a red aggressive deck, you're just going to find that you have a bunch of goblins in your deck already anyways, right?
Definitely.
So,
yeah. So I agree 100%. So goblins, yeah. There's some stuff, but it's not a pushed theme, mm-hmm. right? I think that's maybe a key way to look at it. Is it's not like, it's not like one of those things where you're like, okay, R&D, I'm picking up what you're putting down, right? Like, it's not like that at all. Right. So, you should consider that as well. Another one would be the skeletons and zombies. Now, the reason I bring up skeletons and zombies is because of the Baron. What is it called? Blood Baron? No.
Death Baron.
Death Baron. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Wow, the names are really escaping me today. But yeah, it's because of the Death Baron, because it actually does do some decent stuff as far as this is concerned. I wouldn't. again, I don't think that there's really enough to build around. Like for skeletons, there's skeleton archer, reassembling skeleton, and bone dragon. So 3 cards total.
Right. One rare, one, how many, Gravedigger and
a mythic rare. A mythic, an uncommon, and a common.
Yeah.
And then for the zombies in this set, there's Death Baron itself. Then there's Diregraph Ghoul, Gravedigger, Graveyard Marshal, which is a rare, Infectious Horror, which is actually a zombie, though not a great card. Somehow Phylactery Lich is also a zombie, though that's a rare again. Stitcher's Supplier, which is an uncommon and not very good. Two-Headed Zombie, that's the 4/2 Menace for 3 and a black. Sure. Walking Corpse, 1 and a black for a 2/2 zombie, and that's it. But there's actually quite a few. Even if you don't count the rares, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if you count the playables, you're down to 2 or 3, but still that's about what you can get, in a set like this. So Death Baron's actually been a decent card to build around. And part of it is because of the combo with the skeleton archer. That has been very good.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. That's kind of just Flame Tongue Kavu, which I don't know if everybody is aware of that card, but basically the combo is that skeleton archer is a skeleton. It gets death touch when it enters the battlefield. It can deal 1 damage to any target. Since it has death touch, that's always going to be lethal. So it can just come into play, take down a colossal Dreadmaw, which is pretty fantastic.
I think that's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I have picked a Dread Baron before, and skeleton archers just skyrocketed in pick value, right? Death Baron, yeah.
For sure.
The other question is whether or not the density of zombies is high enough that you would ever consider first picking a Liliana, because that's been kind of a weird, like I got that in my pre-release sealed, and I was playing black and I couldn't run her.
I mean, she did, when we did our breakdown earlier of the jank to great rares. Yeah. She was jank. She was in the jank. She's just unplayable. Yeah.
Right. But I could see a deck coming together where you first picked her and you just kind of snagged almost every zombie that you picked. And the payoff might
just
be
full on build around.
Yeah. Payoff might be worth it, at that point, but, yeah, it's pretty extreme, that's you opening up a mythic and then probably having to make some very strange picks from a pick order perspective in order to make it work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that is the only other question with the zombies deck. I still think it's unlikely, but yeah, maybe. I mean, the problem I think that you see is if you do that, then you're prioritizing some really bad cards, right? Like you're taking, 2 for 2 and that kind of stuff. Yeah. And if you don't draw your Liliana, your deck is just terrible. Like it's way worse than the average deck. So probably not worth it. Elves is another card because Elvish Clan Callers in the set that pumps up all your other elves. The problem is they're not very good. So there are some. It's not that there aren't any. You've got Druid of the Cowl, which we love. You've got Elvish Rejuvenator, which is playable. You've got Gear Per Guide, which is playable. You've got Greenwood Sentinel. That's the 1 and a green 2/2 Vigilance. Happens to be an elf. I actually really, really dislike that card. Like I never play it, and I kind of like it when my opponents do. But still, it's a thing. And then you've got Reclamation Sage, which is a fine card, 2 and a green for a 2/1. And when it enters the battlefield, you can destroy an enchantment or artifact. Thorn Lieutenant is a rare, so we won't really count that. But Poison Tip Archer is great. That's the 2 black, green, 2/3 reach, death touch, and whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses a life. And then even the Skyrider Patrol, the 2 green, blue, 2/3 flying into the beginning of combat. You can pay green, blue to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control, and it gets flying until end of turn. Another great uncommon. The elves are actually kind of here. The problem is the Clan Caller is so bad that I still don't even care.
I've had 2 instances now, once in sealed and once in draft, where I had 2 of them, and I wasn't able to make it work in either scenario. In the sealed pool, I opened 2 of them and then just didn't have a density of elves for them to matter enough. And in the draft, I got one on the wheel, like 14th pick, and then I got another one 3rd pick and then tried to prioritize elves. And at the end of the day, it was going to pump up maybe 3 of my other creatures. And it was a 2-mana 1/1 that fetched up a another bear that made it into a bear. And I mean, it's just, you're not really doing it. So
yeah, exactly. The payoffs just aren't worth it, even though the density of them is actually kind of there. The last one are knights. And the knights thing is kind of interesting because the card that it revolves around is Valiant Knight, the rare. It's 3 and a white for a 3/4 human knight. Other knights you control get +1/+1, but also you can pay 3 white to have knights you control gain double strike until end of turn. Now here's the other knights that are in the set. There's Cavalry Drill Master, 1 and a white, 2/1. When it ETBs, target creature gets +2/+0 and gains first strike until end of turn. Okay, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And then the card I liked that we mentioned before, Gallant Cavalry, and that one's especially good because it's 3 and a white for a 2/2 human knight that makes another human knight. They both have vigilance. It makes another white knight creature token with vigilance. So those both get pumped off of Valiant Knight. So you're actually getting double duty there. Then it falls off. You've got Knight of the Tusk, which is the 4 white 3/7 with vigilance. Not a great card. The other next one's a rare. It's Lena, Selfless Champion. She's obviously great, but she's a rare.
Right.
And then you've got Novice Knight, which is the one we talked about before. White 2/3 defender, but if you equip or enchant it, then it can attack. So you're basically really focused in on Gallant Cavalry. Like Valiant Knight plus Gallant Cavalry, both cards that you'd like to play anyway. But I view this as a little bit more of a sweet, rather than like I'm trying to build around this, right?
Sandra, my girlfriend, is super lucky, and she got the Valiant Knight, and she had the Sky Scanner strapped up with Sword of Valoron and was hitting in the air for 8, 6 every turn. That was pretty good. And also with a 2/2 double strike coming in every single turn. She won that game. So
okay, yeah. So Sword of Valoron makes the thing that it's equipped a knight, and it also spits out a 2/2 knight. So if you have Valiant Knight with that, forget it. Yeah. So, but again, I think the only, none of these, the broad answer to are the tribal synergies even real in this set is no. This isn't a tribal set and they didn't push it, but there is a lord in each color. So it's worth looking into. I think goblins is the only one that you can kind of do. And the rest are one-off stuff, like you mentioned, the Valiant Knight plus Gallant Cavalry. That's good.
Right.
The Death Baron plus the Archer. That's good. But these aren't these are more like tiebreakers or things that you should adjust your how much you prioritize playing them a little bit more. But the truth is, these are all cards that I'm pretty happy to play anyway.
Right. Yeah.
The Reassembling Skeleton plus the Baron or whatever is pretty good. Okay. 2 more things to cover here. First thing, I want to talk about just a bunch of random cards that people have been talking about in the community and we wanted to touch base on. And then we're going to go over the decks that Woody and I have won our first 3 trophies of the format each with, and just sort of just give a broad strokes. We have I have the list for mine, and Woody has the ones that he knows about, but we're just going to give you sort of a snapshot of what's been winning for us in the early stages. Sample size isn't there yet to really dig into the numbers on these, but it's just a snapshot. So some of the cards I wanted to talk about, first up is Chaos Wand. So this is a card that we gave a very low grade on the set review, and some people disagreed. And I wanted to kind of touch on it again. So Chaos Wand is 3 mana for an artifact. At rare, you can pay 4 mana, tap it, target opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile an instant or sorcery card. You may cast the card without paying its mana cost, then put the exiled cards that weren't cast this way on the bottom of that library in a random order. So some people think this card's really good. I do not. I stand by our grade, roughly speaking. I've maybe changed it. I don't remember exactly. I think we gave it an F. I might have changed it. I can't remember. Where I have it right now is sideboard C or somewhere in that range. So Chaos Wand is absurdly slow. You're paying 7 mana before you first activate it. You don't know what you're going to hit. You can try to time it so that you give yourself the best chance. For example, if you're playing against a player playing blue, you might want to wait until they cast a spell before you activate Chaos Wand in the case that you hit a cancel or something like that. Because if you hit it otherwise, it just doesn't do anything. You are relying on your opponent playing some number of instants and or sorceries that are not conditional to the moment that you activate the wand. So combat tricks, generally speaking, don't apply. Though again, you can try to set it up so that it goes the right way. And counter spells as well. X spells don't count. So any Bane Fires or anything like that you're not going to be able to cast them. This is starting to be a pretty narrowed down list, right? Like I'm feeling very pessimistic about it at that point.
So the argument that I've posed, when I was talking about this card, and it's a card that I tend to main deck in sealed. The main reason being that everybody is going to try to jam as much removal as they can, right? Everybody's trying to run all their Lich's Caresses, their Murders, their Electrifies, things like that. This card's kind of funny. It scales a lot with how good your opponent is because I saw somebody, activated it at the pre-release, and this is when everybody's just jamming all the cards. They have no idea, what's good or bad. And like they hit the fog and I'm like, so, it really, like if your opponent is going to be running some speculative stuff, if they're running, a bunch of revitalizes and, things like that, then, maybe you want to start bringing it out. And like you said, if there are a lot of cards that are going to make timing really awkward, like if they're running the counterspell deck, you probably just want to take it out so that you can just avoid the headache of having to time it correctly. If they're running a bunch of pump spells, you definitely want to take it out. But yeah, with some decks, specifically the decks that are running, a bunch of removal. Like if that was how they attacked their particular pool, they just ran the two colors where they're running all the removal, which is what most people, I think, that's usually one of the big incentivizing factors for which colors they pick for their seal pool is which ones have the most removal. It tends to be pretty good, like if you're tapping 4 and getting a random removal spell, that's pretty decent. If you're hitting switcheroo.
Well, that's pretty bad. Right. I mean, and what I mean by that is the first activation has cost you 7 mana and a card.
Sure.
Right now, if you hit a removal spell, that's okay. Now, the second one is when you start profiting, right? That's when you start to generate card advantage as a result of putting this otherwise liability of a card in your deck. And that part is good. Like, you can absolutely, like, if you're playing against especially like, I think black red is the optimal color combo because almost all of their removal is instant or sorcery based. And you can use it to start picking apart their stuff. They're likely to have Electrify, all the cards that we mentioned earlier, as far as the removal goes. So I like it there, but the problem is that if you play it against, like, there's some removal, think of Luminous Bonds.
Yeah.
Dwindle. Hieromancer's Cage. Like, these are cards that people go into their sealed pool to say, I'm going to play white because I got 2 Luminous Bonds and a Hieromancer's Cage. In other words, they're using the exact logic that you said, and Chaos Wand whiffs on all of those.
That's
right?
true.
That's heavily, so where I have it now is a sideboard card against certain archetypes where if they're playing a controlling black-red deck, Chaos Wand I think is very good. Right. If they're heavy black removal that you've seen, I think it's pretty good too. But boy, there's some colors that really dodge this. And it was hilarious. I've had my opponent play this against me. They activated it. They hit one spell. It was something. It didn't actually do anything. Then I drew the last instant or sorcery in my deck because I only had 4.
Yeah.
Like, remember, if you play 15 creatures, that's 8 slots for non-creature spells. It's not like all 8 of those are automatically, you might run an equipment. You might run, an arcane encyclopedia, right? Like you might run a random enchantment like a patient rebuilding or something like that. Like these are eating those slots and leaving you with between 2 and 6 or something, instants and sorceries. My opponent on the second spin, so I drew my last one. On their second spin, they just whiffed. Yeah. They're just like, they got to see my whole deck. I guess that's not nothing. But like, I'm just sitting there like, you just spent 10 mana to cast like Shock. Like that's what they hit, Shock. It didn't even kill anything. That is too low of a downside for me to give this thing like a high grade or think that it's like a really good card.
Yeah, no, it's not great. But like we said, the mana sinks in this set are pretty few and far between, and this does count. I mean, this is 4 mana, get a random effect, which sometimes if you're in a situation where you're at parity, like that will be enough to put you into a situation where you have enough advantage where you're going to win. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe the couple of times that I've spun on it, it's worked out better than average. I mean, I hit switcheroo a couple of times in clutch spots and, and ended up winning the game. Maybe I'm just running above average with it. I haven't played it a ton, to be honest, but it's a rare, so you don't get it a ton, but I
think it's pretty bad. When people played against me, I'm generally happy about it.
My hope would be that my sealed pool would be good enough where I didn't have to start it in the main deck. And if it, I've had pools where I felt like I needed to main it just because my deck was bad enough, that I felt like I just needed some potentially powerful effect. And then I ended up siding it out pretty frequently if it looked like it was going to be bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Dryad Greenseeker, we talked about that. Sky Scanner, we talked about that. We love that card. How about this one, Woody? This is you kicked off the format in style with Vine Mare plus Ether Tunnel. Uh-oh.
Yeah, old Mr. Dead, I call him.
What did you think about that?
Well, I didn't have fun and my opponent didn't have fun, but the game got over pretty quickly. It just feels stupid when you do it, to be honest. It's not impossible to interact with. They can like bounce or destroy the enchant.
Ether Tunnel.
Yeah, and then block and stuff. But man, it just makes their life is just so hard,
it just narrows down their options so much.
And when they bounce the Aether Tunnel, it's not like it's, like it is going to slap down on something else and they're going to have to deal with it again. I mean, it becomes a real nightmare. Vine Mare is a card that I'm so scared of, when it hits the battlefield, that I'm just like, I'm so quick to, like, the first time they offer a trade, I'm just going for it. You know what I mean? Like, unless...
Oh, me too.
Unless I'm trading something really insane on my side, I just really do not want that thing to get strapped up and get cheesed out, because I just want to play Magic. I want to be able to make decisions. And if you let that card survive a little bit, down the field, and they top deck a Blanchwood Armor and, give it +5/+5, you're just not going to play Magic at that point, really. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I'm wondering if this becomes for longtime listeners, they'll remember way back to Innistrad days, where we had a combo that was considered kind of the one black mark on the set, which was the Butcher's Cleaver plus Invisible Stalker. There was also two. I believe that those were both uncommons as well, right?
Yeah.
And
that was not fun.
And that was not fun either. Yeah. It resulted in a 4-powered unblockable lifelinker.
Yeah, with hexproof.
With hexproof. Yeah. So it was not a particularly fun combo either. And I've heard rumblings already that Vine Mare plus Ether Tunnel is kind of this set's version of that, but we'll see. Rustwing Falcon, it's white mana for a 1/2 flyer. Have really been unimpressed with this card. People play it all the time against me, and every time they do, I just feel like they tore up a card. Right. Like I don't know if there's a better way to leverage it with auras like +3/+3 or something like that. But from everything that I've seen, the card is basically ignorable and just not really worth it.
I can see the psychology behind it. Like if they're trying to draft the glorified charge, Trumpet Blast deck, and they're just looking for the density of low casting cost bodies. But the problem is when you don't draw those cards, you end up, you lower your board quality to the point where you might end up letting them stabilize or whatever.
Totally. Also, one thing I want to note about that red-white archetype, we're going to talk about it in a minute, but I don't find it to be overly aggressive. I have it firmly in the mid-range style deck, just a little on the quicker end of that mid-range, but it's like you're just trying to set up a scenario where you can get off one of these huge mass pump spells, while offering trades and that, the trades are not trades as you see fit. But I don't see it as like a turn 4 deck or something like that. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there, which is, I think, another reason why I think Rustwing Falcon isn't worth it.
Right. Uh-huh.
Okay. Early front runner for best card in the set. Tezzeret.
Yeah, I'll have to take your word for it. I'm not lucky enough to open this card, but
Yeah, I did. In sealed, and the card was completely off the charts. I don't know if it's going to be the best possible card in this set, but right now it's my number one. A quick correction, or not actually correction, but in addition to what we talked about with Windreader Sphinx on the rare set review, forgot to mention that Windreader Sphinx triggers when any creature with flying attacks, and that includes your opponent's creatures.
Yeah.
Astute listener pointed that out on Twitter.
Me
Thank you for that.
Me and my opponent learned this at the same time while playing on Magic Online, and one of us was really
like, oh, yeah. Was it you?
Yeah, it was me.
Yeah, nice. But yeah, so don't forget that. It doesn't actually come up that often because you have a 3/7 flyer and what's attacking into it. But hey, if they do, you get to draw.
It's usually when they're attacking you on the way back, that it matters.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
totally. And then the last one I wanted to talk about was Sarkhan's Unsealing. And this is a card that we recognize as having great potential in the set review show, and I have to say that it has lived up to that potential a few times, both for me and against me. 3 and a red enchantment. Whenever you cast a creature spell with 4, 5, or 6 power, it deals 4 damage to any target. And then whenever you cast a creature spell with 7 or greater, it does 4 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control. I had a board where I was effectively assured victory. My opponent played Sarkhan's Unsealing, and I thought, that's a little bit annoying, but I was so far ahead on board that I figured even if my opponent triggered that once or twice, I still was going to be able to win this game pretty handily. I really just didn't think it was going to be a big deal. And then they just cold top deck Inferno Hellion, 3 and a red, 7/3 with trample, and killed every creature I had. I'm like, oh my God. Like, I literally just got like 7 for 1.
Right.
And then they just killed me 2 turns later. I was like, wow, that was one of the biggest turnarounds I've ever had in limited ever. Because it was a one-sided sweeper and it killed every one of my creatures. So the power is definitely there. And trust me, it's not just that blowout that's had that. I've also used it where I never triggered it with 7. That's the only time I've seen it triggered 4 or against me at 7, but I've seen it on 4, 5, or 6 multiple times. And it does work. The card's good.
Yeah. I love the card. And it's a fun card to draft around because it changes your pick orders, which I like cards like that, that a card that'll make you take a Rocks Oracle over a generally better card. It's neat, right? It changes the drafting experience. And yeah, I found it to be really sweet.
Definitely.
There's a little bit of tension the first turn that you play it, especially if they're curving out, you feel like you're behind, when you tap out for 4 mana and you don't do anything. But yeah, if you can follow it up with anything, you tend to feel like you got the game pretty locked. If you get to play any 4 mana creature and cause it to flame tongue Kavu, you feel like you're pretty even on value. And if you ever play the second one, it just feels like you're breaking it.
For power creatures.
Right. Yeah, correct. Totally. I've tried to draft that plus the Colossal Majesty deck. I found the Colossal Majesty to be more or less unnecessary. I mean, it's sweet, but it's not I never try to draft this deck without the Sarkhan's Unsealing, right? Like, I don't think I've ever tried to just draft this straight. I forgot the name of it now. A Colossal Majesty deck. Have you?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, in fact, I have. I'm actually 2-0 with one on Magic Online right now, and after we're done recording, I'm hoping to get another trophy with it. I'm running 1 copy of it, and I have 7 enablers or something, and it's been good. I mean, it just allows you to change gears and just sit there and be like, go. And you're sitting behind your stupid 4/5 Thornhide Wolves, and your opponent's like, well, crap. Yeah. Like, I cannot sit here anymore. And when you gear your deck, it's like there's this huge turning point where you have the 4-power creature and you have that enchantment and you say go, and you're just like, please, please, please. Because if they pass it back, now you're drawing the extra cards and now you're more likely to keep it going. Yeah. And the things you're playing are huge. It's not like it's rewarding you for playing an artifact that doesn't do anything. These are 4-powered creatures. They're huge.
Right.
And the game snowballs very, very quickly.
Eventually you have enough redundant creatures that they just have to accept the fact that you're drawing to a turn for the rest of the game.
Right. And again, you're adding beef, like real serious action to the board.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a great card, but in the right build, I think it's absolutely worth including. Let's talk about our trophy winning decks. You have 3 of them here. What have you won with?
So I had a blue-white artifacts deck that had 3 of the aerial engineers.
4. You had 4, right?
No, I had 3. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I wish I had 4. That'd be pretty sweet.
Typos.
Sorry. But yeah, that one felt pretty busted. It had a lot of artifacts. It had, it was running a lot of the, I can't remember its name, but the blue and 2 comes into play, makes a Thopter.
Oh yeah. The Pioneer, the aviation Pioneer, or whatever.
Yeah. And so like when I was laying out my deck, I had like 5-ish just normal artifacts, but then I had like 4 creatures that made an artifact when it entered the battlefield. So I was just like, wow, these things are just always turned on, which was fantastic. I think I had a Windrider Sphinx in the deck as well. So, I had a lot of games.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, where I would like curve 3-drop into the aerial engineer, and then, like later you drop a Sphinx, attack with the 4/4, draw a card, and it just hummed. Deck was really sweet.
Okay.
I won one game or one draft there with a green-white deck that just had really, really high card quality. It just had a Palaka Worm and a Goreclaw, and it just had like all the good white removal. Like I think it had double Luminous Spawn, Mancer's Cage. Is that what how you say that?
Cage.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It just put a lot of beef down, and it was able to deal with their creatures, and I think it had a couple of Pegasus, so it was able to like pick up a Goreclaw or another giant green creature and fly through the air, and when they dropped a flyer, you were able to remove it, and just kind of ran over them.
But this felt very much to you just like raw card quality winning the day,
right? Yeah, and it had like a suite of Rabid Bites, and it just felt like a green-white deck that had a lot more removal than normally that color pair has, and just the card quality kind of just stomped everybody. And then the third one was the sweetest one by far. So this one was kind of weird. I first picked Patient Rebuilding.
Oh yeah.
And then the packs after that were pretty weak, and so I started taking Wall of Mist. I was like, I'm just going to try to like draft the control deck, and I ended up with like 2 Wall of Mists in the first pack, and just like Salvager Secrets, Essence Scatter, that kind of stuff. And it was mostly blue. I didn't really have a second color going into the second pack, and then I opened Arcades, which is the Elder Dragon that cares about defenders, and I'm like, okay, well we're doing this, right? So took that, and I ended up with a deck that had 5 Wall of Mists, 4 of the O3. I had like a Gargoyle Sentinel, maybe a Suspicious Bookcase. I mean, I had 11 defender creatures or whatever. And
oh my god.
Yeah, I was running Omen Speakers, so that I could like, because the deck could not attack for the win almost, like I think it had a couple of Horizon Scholars, so maybe technically could have, but and it had the Patient Rebuilding, which would also, so like there were 2 angles to the deck that worked really well together. It set up a pretty good defense, at least on the ground, and it had with
all the Wall of Vines and Wall of Mist.
It obviously didn't have great removal because I was splashing the white, so it was main blue green, but it had 3 Dwindles, so I was able to kind of leverage those against the big flying threats. Usually, like I didn't ever have to remove anything on the ground that was less than like a Colossal Dreadmaw, because I could block it. And then if they ever dropped a big flyer, I could suit it up and just kind of ignore it. And then I would win the game either through Patient Rebuilding, sitting behind all my walls, that's also in the conversation for being one of the best cards in the set, in my opinion. It's a little different though.
Okay.
It's not as proactive as Tezzeret, but man, once you get that card going, it's insane.
Yep.
And then Arcades, like I had a turn where I played Arcades, played 4 defenders, drew 4 cards, and the next turn I attacked for like 30. So, yeah, it was pretty good.
Is that a good turn?
Yeah. I ended up playing Recollect in the deck. Like I just mained it, which is a card that I don't main very often, but the deck was so linked to these, two win conditions, because like the rest of the cards just did nothing. So I had to make sure that, if like Arcades got canceled, or if Patient Rebuilding got blown up, I needed to do that. So.
By the way, Recollect's been totally fine for me. I have it way higher than I normally do for that type of effect. I don't know why. Yeah. I haven't figured out why I like it more, but I've been playing it like pretty regularly and been happy with it. It gets back anything. Yeah. We haven't had that in a while, so that's probably it. I can just buy back a removal spell. It's just clunky, but like I just find that in a format, which I think this one's starting to shake out to be, which is a lot more about just raw power rather than synergies. A few of the decks that you get have some really good synergies and they feel busted, like the ones that you mentioned. But a lot of the time, you're just comparing card quality to each other. Like you're just jamming creatures and removal spells. And when you can buy back, a good card rather than having to draw another mediocre one, I think that's more powerful.
Right.
I've got 3 trophies on my main account as well. And they came in 3 different decks. So the first one, 3 different archetypes, I should say. The first one was red-green stuff. It was really a simple one, but it had 2 Draconic Disciple in it, plus a Druid of the Cowl. And then at the top, I had 3 Colossal Dreadmaw, a Prodigious Growth, a Vivian's Invocation, and then I even had some good 5-drops. The interesting part about this deck, though, was that I was playing Declare Dominance and Prodigious Growth. So I was able to just like pick and choose my spots and just destroy my opponent's board, either with Declare Dominance or forcing them to block when I Prodigious Growth something for the win. It felt like I was playing Overrun. Yeah. Like it was like, oh, you tapped out. Sorry, play this, you're dead. And it was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm just dead.
Right.
But this was a classic ramp spell,
yeah,
ramp thing.
Very often, like I played Prodigious Growth a couple of times too, and it like you slap it on the one creature and you're like, okay, well I can attack with this one creature, and then you like start doing the trample math and you're like, I can just attack with everything. Like even if some of the attacks look like they're just going to be eaten, like you realize that they need the toughness that creature was going to provide just to not die, and all your other creatures are just going to get in anyways. So even if they untap and deal with the creature that's suited up, like they've just they've dropped to such a low life total that it's sort of warped the game at that point. Card's been pretty good in my experience.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. This was also, by the way, a Colossal Majesty deck. And let me just count. I had, 2 ogres. I had Sigiled Sword of Valoron, which helped with the Colossal Majesty. I had Inferno Hellion, Volley Veteran, Havoc Devils, Bristling Boar, Vigilant, Baloth, Rock's Oracle, Colossal Dreadmaw, Colossal Dreadmaw, Colossal Dreadmaw. So that is 7. And then also the Vivian's Invocation, which would often find me one. So I had effectively 8 plus the sword. So lots of ways to get that thing going. The next one was blue-black. And this one was kind of interesting. It was a Patient Rebuilding deck. And I agree with you, Wood. This card is completely insane. And this was a power level deck for sure. Highlights, Gin of Wishes, Patient Rebuilding. And then I also had 2 Strangling Spores and a Murder, as well as just a bunch of good stuff to fill it in. I had a couple of Surge Mares, 2 Essence Scatterers, Nightmare's Thirst, 2 copies of Sift. I basically could just remove anything of relevance and win the game with Patient Rebuilding and or Gin of Wishes. So that was pretty straightforward. And then the last one was a red-white aggressive deck. Also had Sigiled Sword of Valoron, by the way. But this was, again, I view these red-white decks a little bit more towards the mid-range. And this one wasn't anything super special. It just was like a good curve deck. What were the highlights? Demanding Dragon was the best card in the deck, and I think that card is absolutely excellent. Right. And then I had 2 Starcrown Stags as well as the Sigiled Sword of Valoron that I mentioned. And that's it. It's just a bunch of filler. Otherwise, some removal, some 2-drops and that kind of thing.
Angel of the Dawns.
And I was able to get a trophy.
Yeah,
good point. Yeah, 2 Angel of the Dawns as well to help kind of clean up. And then the last deck I wanted to mention before we sign off for the day was one that should have been a trophy. And by should have, I mean probably shouldn't have been, because I did lose in the finals with it. But still, I was really thinking I was going to win. I went 2-0-2-0, like wasn't even close. And this was highly, highly synergistic blue-white artifacts deck. So I had a pick. This was yesterday, by the way, where I could have taken either Electrify, this is pack 1, pick 1, or Psy Master Thopterist, the one that makes a 1/1 Thopter whenever you cast an artifact, and you can pay 1 in a blue effect, 2 artifacts, draw a card. And I'm like, screw it. I'm taking side.
Yeah.
We're just going to do this from the very get-go. And I started taking sky scanners. I ended up with 2 of those. And then I got kind of lucky. I opened 2 copies or, early picks, had early picks of 2 Ether Shield Artificers, the 3 and a white 3/3s that give a artifact creature +2/+2 and indestructible at the beginning of combat. And I just passed them. Because it's such a terrible card, unless you're in this deck specifically, that I just thought that they would come back, and they both did. And I took good cards over them. I took like a Sift and a Essence Scatter or something. I can't remember. But I ended up with 3 Scholar of the Stars, 1 Aerial Engineer, 2 Ether Shield Artificers, with 2 Sky Scanners, 2 Field Creepers, a Manolith, an Explosive Apparatus, and 3 Gearsmith Guardian. And then I had also a Hieromancer's Cage and a Cleansing Nova, the sweeper. So I had kind of all my bases covered. And it was stupid. I would play Sky Scanner, draw a card, then play Scholar of Stars, draw a card, then play Scholar of Stars the next turn, draw another card. I'm just these are all just cantripping. Then I'd find another Sky Scanner. Then I'd play Gearsmith Guardian. Then the turn before when it was actually unsummoning sick, I'd play Ether Shield Artificer and suit up either the Guardian itself or the Sky Scanner, depending on how the board looked. And my opponent's like, what is going on here? And I've got 5 cards in my hand because I've played all these cantrips. It's just insane. Right. And then, God forbid, I had Psy on turn 3. The game was just completely a joke at that point. So it could keep itself refueled while building on its board, and that's a pretty attractive combo. But I did lose a really sweet 3-game match in the finals. But it's a kind of match that I feel like I could have won. I wasn't good enough for whatever reason.
Yeah, I haven't got to draft the blue-white artifact deck very often, but the one deck that I did draft where I trophied that had all the 4/4 flyers for 4, the aerial engineers, I don't think I dropped a game in that draft, and it felt really busted. When you get that level of synergy in a core set, it just so that's something to look out for. I think that if you pick like a good blue card or a good white card and then you get past an aerial engineer, I think you're very well suited to take it and just start moving in. It's often open to that deck, right? Because the cards, like you said, they're not very good on their own. So
that's right. Yeah. So I think that deck is very real, but you do need to be willing to commit, and you better hope you're the only one at the table doing it, or else you're going to be fighting. Okay, let's call it a show, Wood. That's going to do it for this one. I want to say thank you again to everybody on the Patreon, patreon.com/limited resources. If you find this show useful, helpful, if it helps you win more, helps you enjoy Magic more, go ahead and head over there. And it's a way to give back to the people that create the things that you love, including the show, hopefully. But there's all different types of stuff over there as well at patreon.com, in our case, /limited resources. Woody, thanks for coming on the show again. You are our resident grinder, and it was great to get your takes as you prepare for the GPs coming up. Where can people find you? And are you going to be posting about your results and stuff at the GPs?
Yeah. I usually, at least I try to remember to post on Twitter. My Twitter is at Woodrodius, which is WOODRODIUS. And
which will also be in the show notes.
Right. And that's the best place to get a hold of me usually, or if you want to keep track of how I'm doing at the out at the tournament. So if I stop posting, I'm probably dead.
Yeah, but you got to post it, man. You got to throw a bad beat story up there, or wine.
Everybody wants to hear those.
There's a shortage. Well, thanks for coming on the show again, Wood. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
If you want to find me on social media, I'm Marshall_LR, and you can find everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com, including every episode of the show ever. They're all there for your listening. You can download the show from there. You can listen to it right on the site. You can subscribe on iTunes or any other way that you get your podcast. Thanks again for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
So I've been a big fan of the Genius or Grifter series.
Oh, yeah.
I love it. And my dad has always kind of walked the line between Genius and Grifter.
Dad? Yeah. Are we getting story time with Woodrow here?
Oh, yeah. This is I just want everybody's opinion on whether or not this was Genius or Grifter. This is a story from my childhood.
Oh, no.
And I'm about 7 or 6 at this point, pretty young. And I have a little brother. He's 2.5 years younger than me, so he's pretty small too. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in Alaska, down on the Kenai Peninsula, in this little town called Ninilchik, and it has nothing. It's just snow and trees and sadness. And we were 180 miles from the next biggest town, which was Anchorage, and it's not a big town by like normal, what we would call the lower 48 standards, but it had stuff, like it had malls and, entertainment. And my dad had to go up to Anchorage on just a trip to buy some building material, something really boring. But he had to take my little brother and me with him because my mom was busy or sick or something. But for some reason, he had to take Gus and I along up to Anchorage. Mm-hmm. And it's 180 miles driving in the winter, on ice. I mean, it's a arduous journey. It's really tiring, and it was going to be a quick turnaround. And Gus and I the whole time are just talking about Chuck E. Cheese. That's where we wanted to go. We loved Chuck E. Cheese. It's an arcade. It's got pizza, and we didn't have a Nintendo. We didn't have we used to have to watch The Simpsons on VHS from a friend up in Anchorage who would record it from cable, with a VCR. Like, it was low tech. So the whole time
I loved Chuck E. Cheese when I was a kid.
Yeah. It's so great. So we're just super stoked. We're talking about Chuck E. Cheese the whole time. And you can tell my dad is just off it, like he's, his plan is to drive 180 miles, go pick up all this stuff. And then we were going to spend the night there, and then the next day just try to get back as quick as possible because driving at night's really sketchy. And, the whole day we're driving around picking up all this stuff. And Gus and I are bored and antsy. We're waiting to get to Chuck E. Cheese. And my dad's kind of just he hasn't said anything, but you can just tell he's not stoked on the idea of going to Chuck E. Cheese. It's not his type of establishment.
And burning a couple hours.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're driving around the industrial district of Anchorage, and my dad sees this kind of freshly burnt down building, and he pulls up to it and he goes, "Oh no, guys, this is Chuck E. Cheese." And Gus and I are looking at just the ruins of this building, and we're like, "Are you kidding?" And he's like, "No, Chuck E. Cheese was right here. It's just gone." And Gus and I kind of start crying and stuff. He's like, "Look, I'm sure they'll have it rebuilt the next time we come up, and I'll take you then." And it worked. We went home, no Chuck E. Cheese, and
my God! And you're asking if that's genius or grifter?
I mean, at the time, if you would have asked me, I would have said grifter. But as the years have passed, I'm like, that was, I would say it's evil genius, but I don't know. You tell me. You tell me what you think.
Wow.